Shalom Chaverim, welcome back to our next installment of our discussion of Rabbi Nachman's Sichos HaRan. Today we're actually going to go out of order, and the reason that we're going to do that is because we have Lag BaOmer coming up in just a few days, the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer, which we're going to observe this Friday. It's a very special day in Judaism in general, and it's a very special day in Hasidism as well. And just a little background on Lag BaOmer, if it's not something that you've really delved into in the past. Lag BaOmer is a big celebration in the middle of a period of some mourning type customs. During the counting of the Omer, we have certain traditions that we avoid festive occasions. We avoid dancing, and we avoid shaving and taking haircuts. And so some of these things are similar to the customs of Jewish mourning and for the dead. And the reason for those customs primarily is because during the days of the famous Rabbi Akiva, his Talmidim, his students, experienced a plague of sorts, and 24,000 of his students, we are told, perished because of this plague. I mean, can you imagine? 24,000 students passed away in this period, and on the 33rd day of the Omer, the plague ceased and the deaths ceased. So that's one of the reasons that we celebrate on Lag BaOmer. But the other thing that we celebrate is a little bit more difficult maybe to comprehend. After Rabbi Akiva's students were wiped out, he sort of started over. And one of his 5 Talmidim Gedolim, one of his 5 great students, was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the Rashbi. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is, in certain ways surpassed his teacher, Rabbi Akiva, and was one of the great tzaddikim of all of history. And really what's most important for our purposes is that the Rashbi is the one who wrote down the Zohar HaKodesh, the Holy Zohar, which is the basis of our understanding of Kabbalah, which was propagated by the Hasidim, starting with Rabbi Nachman's great-grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, and proceeding on from there. So the basis for Kabbalah comes from the Zohar, which was written down and compiled by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Well, what does Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai have to do with the 33rd day of the Omer? And Lag BaOmer, that's actually the day on which the Rashbi died. It's his yahrzeit. And it's a little bit confusing, I think, sometimes. Why would we be celebrating the death of this great tzaddik? I mean, after all, we have on the day that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, we observe his yahrzeit with a fast. Many of us do. Some even observe a fast on the yahrzeit of his brother Aaron. And these are typically days of sadness. But in the case of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we observe his yahrzeit as a great celebration. And in fact, hundreds of thousands of people will be at his kever, at his gravesite in Meron in Israel for Lag BaOmer this year, as every year. And many of them will be Breslov Hasidim. And the reason that they're there is to basically speak directly to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and to ask for his intercession on their behalf. Now, this is a difficult concept for some, and I want to show you, though, that there is a basis for this idea in Rabbi Nachman's teachings, and also in the teachings of his great-grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov. And so today we're going to go out of order, and we're going to look at Sicha number 156. And we're not going to read the whole thing, but in Sicha number 156, it discusses the fact that the Rebbe specifically picked out an apartment when he moved to Uman. And remember, we've talked about this before. He moved to Uman because he decided that was the place that he was supposed to die, which is, a very self-aware and kind of interesting tidbit. But he moved to Uman, and he specifically chose an apartment that overlooked the town's cemetery. And someone was sort of, commenting on the fact that it must be difficult for him to, constantly be looking at this cemetery and to hear people, going to the cemetery and crying out to their deceased relatives. And Rabbi Nachman explains, this is in Sicha 156. If you're in the BRI version, it's on page 72. It says, the Rebbe explained, when you visit your parents' graves, it is best to ask those who are buried nearby to inform your parents that you are there. Though most souls depart to their destiny, not all souls ascend to their intended place, and many remain near their graves. Therefore, it is best to tell those other souls to inform your parents. This is an interesting idea. He's saying, chances are that your parents' souls have moved on to Gan Eden, to Olam Haba, and there's, they're not going to know that you're there. But there's probably some souls that haven't ascended on high yet, all the way, and might still be lingering around. And he says you should ask them to ask your parents, to let your parents know that you're there trying to speak to them. But this is the important part for today's purposes. Rabbi Nachman continues, but when you visit a tzaddik, you need not worry that he is not there. For the death of a tzaddik is like going from one room to another. And there's a footnote here that says, that this is almost a direct quote from Rabbi Nachman's great-grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, who said the same thing. He said, the death of a tzaddik is moving from one room to another room. And then it says, the Rebbe then told his daughter, take me as an example. Right now, I am in this room. I can go to the next room and close the door. And if you stand by the door and cry out, Father, Father, will I not hear you? And then Reb Nassim says, we heard similar things from the Rebbe's holy lips many times. He suggested to each one of us in many ways the great importance of visiting his grave. He promised that he would certainly hear what we said and help us in any way possible. So, Rabbi Nachman here is pointing out something really quite amazing, and it helps us to understand Lag BaOmer. Rabbi Nachman is saying that with a tzaddik, you don't need to worry about whether they can hear you. He says they are certainly able to hear you, and their death is just like moving from one room into the next. And just as you could call out to someone from one room to the next room, you can call out to the tzaddik from this world to the next world. And Rabbi Nachman is going a step further and saying that he's giving his promise that if people are to come to his kever, which many do, many Breslov Hasidim visit his kever, his grave in Uman every year, and pray there, that he would help, and support those prayers. Right? Now, again, we're not praying to Rabbi Nachman or anyone else, chas v'shalom, not to any human being. We're praying to Hashem, but with the intercession and help of the tzaddik of Rabbi Nachman. And so on Lag BaOmer, many are going to be at the kever of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai doing exactly the same thing. They're going to be asking the Rashbi to intercede on their behalf. This great master of the secrets of Torah, of Kabbalah, is going to be asked by hundreds of thousands to stand with them as they pray, and to guide them and to help them in their avodas Hashem. And so, in many ways, there is something liberating about the death of a tzaddik, in that then their intercession and their assistance becomes available to all people. Not only are they just in, like passing to another room, but they're in a room that connects to everyone else's room at that point. They're in a room where they can be reached by any and every one, as opposed to during their physical lifetime, when they're available only to those who are physically in their presence. Obviously, during Rabbi Nachman's lifetime, and similarly Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's lifetime, only their students had access to their intercession and to their greatness in Torah. But once they passed away, their Torah becomes available, their intercession becomes available to everyone. And that is indeed cause for celebration. And that's why, primarily on this Friday, on Lag BaOmer, we're going to celebrate the yahrzeit of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, a great, great tzaddik, who, upon his death, simply moved from one room to another, from Olam Hazeh to Olam Haba. So I wish everyone a joyous and festive Lag BaOmer, and I look forward to talking to you more about Sichos HaRan further. B'siyata d'shmaya. Thanks so much for tuning in.